The first episode of a thing I'm going to be trying where I basically try to learn how to use Unity as a senior engineer who's never really done serious game development before. So I figure I'll be kind of learning through this process and kind of talking my way through it. So first of all, I'll describe the project a little bit. I'm basically trying to build a editor for a side-scrolling game, or maybe even several side-scrolling games that I can put onto an iPad. So I can do my art assets in Procreate or something similar, import them into this application, and then build out side-scroller levels right there on the iPad. So that means it's a pretty UI-heavy project. So now Unity comes with a lot of UI elements that are already in there. So if you go to the inspector over here, these are all the basic Unity UI pieces, and they're very, very basic. I was having kind of trouble. I didn't really feel like building them up completely. So I actually went to the asset store in Unity and I picked up something called Modern UI, which you can see right here. And basically, let me get that on here. So Modern UI is a package that basically has all of these different UI elements just sort of built into it. And as you can see, it's $20 for you can use it as many games as you want to. So I picked that instead. I've been slowly trying to learn how to add all of this stuff in Unity. So my goal yesterday was just to get this list of packs over here. So basically the plan I have is the editor part is going to be here, where you actually see the world that your characters are going to be moving through. Over here, this is meant to be sort of a selection of different kinds of assets. So like for a spaceship, you might have different kinds of bulkheads and items you find on the spaceship, whereas here you might have things that are found on the station and so on. So for a given level, it'll only have to load assets for whichever of these you end up using. And that's also a way of organizing. So my plan is basically you have this list of, I'm calling them packs, side packs here. If you click on one of these, it'll pop out a modal that'll have a grid with all of the different assets you created within that category. Up here, I'm planning to have a drop-down selector that will let you select the level within the project. Not really planning on having a project selector yet, although I probably will down the road. Probably planning on having a couple options down here as well, like a dot, rectangle, line, that kind of thing. So right now I'm just kind of trying to get the file integration going. So my immediate goals are to get some more hooked up to data than it is, to allow you to create new packs, get this modal window here working, and then get this drop down window up here working as well. And then beyond that, in future episodes, things like that, my plan is also to include a image integration. So this right now is 4:3 ratio, which is the size of the iPad. So my plan is to basically have a thing here. If we click this, pops out the thing, you can hit the plus button to add a new asset, and it'll automatically access the iPad photo library. I'll probably also build one of these for PC as well, just because it's such a common platform to develop games on. But my immediate goal is to put it on the iPad so that I can sit in bed and do my artwork and immediately work on levels as well. So in order, we have the UI creation. We have that linked up to data that's stored in a file format, probably JSON or something similar, on the iPad. We have the ability to import photos from the iPad, and then the ability to export the entire project as a zip file so that you can actually use it in actual game development. So that's sort of the goal. I really don't know what I'm doing with Unity. I've been programming for 20 years now, but the entirety of what I've been doing is mostly like native iOS as well as full stack web programming, which is what I do professionally. So I'm a very experienced programmer, but I'm completely new to Unity. And I'm hoping that by doing this, you can kind of see a little bit what some general programming principles, as well as sort of the experience of learning how to use Unity, which is a very intimidating thing to look at, but at the end of the day, if you take it in small enough pieces, it all kind of makes sense. So I'm just going to start developing, and you can pretty much see the process. I'll try to talk through it as much as I can. Let's talk about the architecture a little bit. So this is Rider, which is the IntelliJ IDE. I'm a big fan of their IDEs, so I picked up this one, but VS Code is free and works nearly as well, I would say. I've got all of my code inside of two different folders here. I have my scripts folder, which is for a lot of editor-specific stuff. Then I have what I'm calling the side engine, which is more or less the engine that's responsible for managing the data itself and then rendering it as a level. The reason that this is separate is because this way I can use it as a module and I can import it into other projects. Whenever you're programming, it's really good to think in terms of modularity, which just means that whatever a component is, most of the actual logic happens under the hood, and it has as few inputs and outputs as possible. That allows you to quickly swap it out, update it, that kind of thing, without sort of creating what you call spaghetti code, which is where everything is sort of connected together and like really interdependent. So if you take out one thing, the entire rest of your project fails. So in terms of architecture, I've got the side engine here, this folder will contain the rendering code once I start adding that in. As you can see right now, I don't have any rendering happening right now. These two items contain the data, which are the pack, which is the thing that, as I think of it like a folder for items, and then the side item here, which will contain the actual sprites, any animation stuff, that kind of thing. And then on the script side, which is editor specific, I've got the model manager here, which is so pretty much the way that I've been thinking about this in terms of how I want to approach the architecture. And if there's any experienced Unity developers who end up watching this, please let me know if I'm making any kind of beginner mistakes. I'd really appreciate it. But essentially my idea for the architecture is that you have what in sort of corporate side programming you would call a model, which is just something to contain the data and logic specific to that data concept, in this case items and packs. You have a manager, which is sort of the interface between the data, the pure data, and the UI. You have controllers, like this list controller here, pack list controller, which is basically just a way of controlling a UI element. And then I'm also probably going to end up adding something like an input, which controls user inputs. Not as big of a deal on this because it's just an editor, so the only real input is actual touch events, click events. And then any kind of scripts that run specific components and things like that. So right now, if you look back at the scene here, this is my main scene. I've got the canvas, which is this UI area that I'm putting my UI stuff onto. The event system handles touches and clicks and things like that. That came with the canvas, I believe. These two input fields, which don't really mean anything. I was just kind of testing some different things. The one actual element that I'm going to keep right now, so I'm actually just going to delete these. You don't need to do that. So we got the list view here, which is the only thing I'm going to keep. The list view is the container that holds the list of side packs. So I'm actually going to change that to rename it over here to side pack list view. Now inside of here you got a scroll area, which is this by the way is actually just the simple modern UI list view here, the standard one. So I clicked that, it created this automatically. Within that, I took out the items they had in there by default, and I added in this button. Now this button is also a modern UI button. In this case, it is the rounded outline button, the orange one. So I added that in there, as a child, and the thing that a Listview does. So everything in Unity, it's not quite like native. It's not like React or something like that, where you sort of actually have like a table HTML element or like an unordered list. And it's also not really like iOS, where you have something like a table delegate. It's actually just a game object, as everything in Unity is, with a bunch of components. In this case, a rect transform, which gives it a shape. In this case, more or less the shape of its parent. It is a canvas render, which allows you to render it on the as part of the UI. You have a content size fitter, which makes sure that the items within it are set to a certain size, if that's something you need. I don't really need to deal with that right now because they're all just versions of the same button. And then the vertical layout group, which just means that any children of this list object here are going to get put in a vertical orientation, one below the other. All right, so within that, I have this one button, which I've set up as a prefab. You can see over here that it's blue. The reason it's blue is because I've actually saved that as a prefab. In other words, I've dragged it off of here into my UI prefabs folder here. So that's my side pack button. And that basically is pretty much just the default. I haven't really changed it too much. Part of what this modern UI button does is it has a script for the button text as well as some of these other things here. So it's pretty much just the default button here. And so what happens is in the code, well, actually let's do one more thing first. So you got the model manager here, which is the code I wrote to handle the entire main editor view here. Model manager references a pack controller, which is the thing that manages this list specifically. I mentioned how a controller is code that I'm using to address a specific piece of UI. So on the list itself, I've added my custom script, the pack list controller, which has a reference to this prefab, the side pack button. Now right now, that thing is the only child of this list view, which is why there's only one button. But what that pack list controller does is it has this single method set, which takes a list of side packs. It deletes every child of the list object, and then for every side pack, it creates a button from that prefab, which is linked here. It gets the button manager component, which is the script that comes with modern UI, and then it sets the text of the button to the name of the side pack. All right. So this is just a purely. It's not like an update. This thing receives a command. It doesn't actually do anything by itself. So far, the model manager is the part that does that because, as I mentioned, it's the interface between the data here and the UI. So right now, I'm just creating these side packs. This is sort of what you call dummy data. It's just data I'm entering because I don't have a way of actually. I haven't created the feature that allows you to add a new side pack right now. So I've created this dummy data here. I've got my reference to the pack list controller here, which does the list controller, and then when this script starts, then the pack list controller sets, using that method I created, this list. So what that looks like in practice is when you run the thing, you can see that creates a button from that prefab using each of the settings I put in here: spaceship, station, and cantina. And if you look over here in the inspector, because we're in run game mode, you can see that it's cloned that side pack button 3 times for each of these 3 different ones, and then it has the different button text. So that's about as far as I've got so far over the last couple of days of messing around with Unity. I think my next goal is to have it so clicking this button actually opens a modal window. And then after that, I'll try to add a grid of objects into that. So stop the game for now. And I'm going to do a little bit of reading. All right. So they've got some documentation here. And if you're new to programming, once you've learned a thing really well, you're not necessarily going to be looking things up all the time. But any programmer, whenever they're doing anything they're not 100% familiar with, is just going to be Googling stuff constantly. I'd say that's probably a good half, maybe like 60% of your job as a programmer is learning how to do new things. Whether that's stuff like putting in a new API, learning a new function, whatever it is. So the way you do that is documentation. This is the documentation provided by the developers for Modern UI. So my goal is to have something pop up here when you hit this button. I think. We're going to see how that looks. We might actually have something more like a panel that pops up instead if we want to look more like a pop out. So let's say so to this canvas we're going to add a modal window, style 1, style 2. I don't really know what the difference is. Let's do style 2. That's it here. 100% sure how this works. So let's test it. So I kind of want it to be about this big. Again, I don't actually know if this is how this works, but we're going to find out. So we've got the background, main content, separator. Okay, well, let's just try it and see how it goes. Okay. Well, first of all, let's just see if we can make it show up. So I'm not even going to deal with linking it to this right now. I'm just going to create a button. Basic blue button. All right. So I'm going to actually create a section of my scripts, a folder called debug. So generally speaking, when you're coding, you try out a bunch of shit. Sometimes that necessarily involves just creating something purely for the purpose of learning how to do something or testing something out. A big beginner mistake is doing all of that within the context of the code that you're already using. I like to mark it out. So if I can, I'll stick it into its own file that I can just delete later with no impact on the rest of my code. If I have to put it inside of another piece of code, I'll mark it with a very loud sort of debug comment like that. But we're not going to deal with that right now because we can actually just put it in a different thing. So we're going to debug, new mono behavior, which is the game object scriptable subclass. We're going to call it test button script. And this is just where I'm at apparently. I have to figure out how to receive a click. So here we go. There's an on-click event here. to Unity how to set name method link click to method inspector. So as you can see, I'm Googling, which is generally speaking the kind of thing that I do. So public void click, click invoke. I think this should work. So I'm pretty sure that the public void is the thing that makes it usable. So I have test button script here. So let's say public void click. We'll go debug log. It worked. So this is one of the reasons that I decided to do this stream, is because I'm so new to Unity that even this basic stuff like linking up a click, which would take me 3 seconds in JavaScript or Swift, I have no idea how to do it. So you can kind of get a sense for how somebody who literally does this for a living still has a hard time with this stuff and has to learn how to do everything. Okay, so I think what I've got to do now is I've got the button script on this button already. I'm pretty sure I have to add my where is it? Test button script. So add test. This one is not working. I may have done this wrong. Okay. Please fix compiler errors before dealing with the new script components. Alright, so we have our errors here in the console. So I might have not imported everything I need to. Using Unity engine. Why is this having a problem? So one thing I'm not really convinced about is the fact that Rider assumes you always have to be in a different namespace, which I don't really appreciate. So a namespace is basically like in C#, it's a way of saying you're working within a certain kind of domain. So like for the engine here, I do have declared a namespace, side engine, which means anything that I do is like side engine.sidepack or side engine.sideItem. For scripts like this, I don't think it's that big of a deal. And I'm pretty sure we don't have any errors now, so I'm pretty sure now, if we go to the test button, yeah, it should show up. Right, so there's the test button script added. And now I'm pretty sure when I hit one time only, I can use I think I can even use this button. Let's see. So let's see if that worked. And if it did, I'll explain what it did. There's the console. It worked. So you can see my log is showing up down there. All right, so what I did is, so the clicks are kind of a pain in Unity, but basically buttons have this on-click event here. Runtime only means that it receives clicks in when you're actually running the thing. Editor, I think it means you can receive clicks in the editor too, but I'm not going to deal with that right now. Runtime only means it'll work when the game is running. This box here receives the actual object to look for scripts in, which in this case is itself. So I dragged itself from over here. If you wanted to do that, you could just click this little thing here, and if you wanted to actually name your button something that made more sense, you could actually just type it in. And then once I have that, I have a list of scripts that are attached to this thing, which are their canvas renderer, button manager, and so on. And then I have the test button script, which is the script that I made, which inside of it has this public void on click, which is the thing that I made. So now we have the click connected. I'll probably do the same thing over here soon. Okay. So now what I want to do is I want to link this test button script component to the modal window. So nope, I want it to be public. And I just want to say so animate window here is the one that should toggle the window. Let's see if that works. I'm going to say window manager dot animate window. So now we just have to connect. So I'm going to click back on our button here and see there's a spot for the window manager. There's only the one in the scene, so we'll select that. Let's see how this works. Ooh, look at that. That's cool. So let's poke around it though. So this is a modal window manager. It's here because I moved it over to the side. When it pops in, it happens in the middle, which actually kind of makes sense for me. What options is it? It gives us a thing to hit on confirm and a thing to hit on cancel. So this kind of, and then here's the text here. So this kind of modal is actually just a pre-designed modal. So that's actually very useful to know, because what I'm looking for is something that pops up and I can put whatever I want to into it. But this is actually the equivalent of like a confirm dialog. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to write something about that. So this is Lepton, which you can download for free. It's open source. Whenever I'm learning how to do anything, I put it in here. So here I've been doing this for about 4 years now, so I've got quite a lot of sort of private information in here about how to do different things. I can search for anything that's related to Unity, like that. So for instance, one of the very first things I tried to do in Unity was create a sort of text game that adds text. And here I've got that piece, including some instructions for doing it. So what I want to do is I want to take some notes for what I just did in case they want to use this in the future. Unity modern UI confirm modal a little search based on this title, so I try to be as descriptive as possible. I'm using a markdown file, marking it as secret because I don't actually want everyone in the world to have access to my notes to myself. So let's see. Pop in the modal window from modern UI, fill out inspector window, wire up confirm and cancel methods to a manager class if desired, and then in a event method, e.g. button on click, backwards ticks there. We'll turn this into code because this is a markdown file. I'll show you that in a second. An event method, e.g. button on click, call. Let's one more step. Wire the what's it called? Modal window component of the new modal window into the event handler script. In the event method, call to toggle or open window to perform showing actions. And then I can also link to this documentation. Oops. Here. Okay. So now I have a link here to the original documentation. I've got a quick instruction. The reason why you do this when you already have that mostly here is because trying to figure out how to do all of that from just this one document takes a little bit of time. If you look at instructions that you write for yourself, it'll help you generally remember, and the act of writing the instructions will help you learn it, so you don't even have to look it up next time. But that way, if, you know, in a few months, I'm doing another UI heavy thing, and I want to just pull up a confirm dialog, I can just hit shift spacebar. I can say, what was that, Unity confirm. Oops, helps if you type right. And then there it is. And you can just use the instructions to actually plug it in like that. Okay. Hi, Joel. I just saw that you joined. Should be exciting. Feel free to ask any questions if they pop up, either in the chat. Maybe if you have any questions, ask them in the Twitch chat, because then I think it'll get saved in the video as well. But I'm not really sure. Okay, so that is cool, but it's actually not the thing that we want to do here. So we're going to get rid of that. We're going to modify our script. Okay. Go to the window manager. I added that while I was in play mode, which is fine. It's generally a bad form, I think. Okay, so we just have our button here. Let's try something else. And again, Joel, since you missed it before, the thing I'm trying to do is make it so I can pop up like a small box here when one of these buttons is pressed, like a small window. Okay, so I'm going to say modal window, what's style one? Same thing. Same thing. Confirm, cancel. So style 1, style 2 are the exact same. Kind of just a simple confirm thing. Okay. What else do we got? What's this movable window? Ooh, that's cool. Let's try that out. Sweet. That could be very handy. Okay. So again, we're basically messing around with this UI pack, which I paid $20 for, because the base stuff for Unity requires a bunch of extra legwork to get it to a working order. So this has like a bunch of extra features. One of which is this cool movable window, which I think would be great for like a really stats-based game, because it's cool to give people that option, but it's also not really what we need right now. I'm pretty sure what we really want is something something a lot more custom than that. So I don't think it's going to give us any options here really. It's not a selector. Not really. So instead, we use the standard UI panel. I'm going to put that here. Like that. Okay. So put a panel inside of the panel. We're going to put a scroll view. Actually, I might have done this backwards. Okay, we'll put the scroll view out here. And then we'll put the panel inside the scroll view. So let's pick how big we want our... Yeah, I messed that up, obviously. I'm just going to delete the panel for now. Okay, let's get our scroll view where we want it to be, which is about like that. About like that. Look at it compared to our whole canvas. It's about that size. So the goal here is when you click one of these side packs over here, this box will pop out here with a grid of different sprites that you can then use to paint onto the level. Now this thing is only going to be here when we're actually using it. So let me see here. So off the top of my head, I think what we want is basically to have it so if you touch outside of this panel while it's active, the panel will close. We're going to want to have a grid view inside of it. With content, we're going to have the ability to create a new item as the last item in the grid view, and then any kind of selection will show up. So we've got the scroll view here. We don't actually want the horizontal scroll bar because I just want it to be a grid that you scroll up and down. So I'm going to go ahead and it's going to let me do that. Apparently I can't go down anymore. Alright. Also, if you didn't know in the editor, you can right click and hold to move the window around a little bit. Okay. So we've got the scroll view here. We're going to put a UI panel on the inside. I think I should do it. Panel, as you can see, automatically sets to the size of the scroll view. And I'm pretty sure I can set it up to automatically expand as needed. That's the thing, basically the next thing we're going to have to learn how to do. But first of all, let's see if we can actually just get to this to show up and hide at the right moment. Okay. So now we have another architecture question, which is how do we actually want to handle this part of it. So I think what we want is we want this to kind of run inside of its own code. So we're going to rename this as the side pack picker view. Side pack content is the panel, and then on the side pack picker view, we're going to add a new script called I actually prefer to do it this way because then you don't have to really mess with the rest of it. So inside of UI, we're going to create a side pack. Let's just call it a pack picker controller. Because, as I mentioned with the architecture before, a controller script is something that I'm defining as code that specifically addresses a particular piece of UI, which in this case is this picker view that we just created. We've got the pack picker script here. We're going to open in Writer. Here. And then we're going to add that as a component here. Pack picker controller. I'm going to say, let's call it public void toggle that. And that is going to show or hide this thing. So let's Google how to do that, shall we? Okay, so this is their how they say to do it. Just use set active on a game object. So every script can reference the game object that is sort of itself. In other words, every mono behavior here means mono behavior means that this is a script attached to a game object, which means that every mono behavior can access the game object it's attached to. So in this case, we just say game object dot set active, not game object dot active is active. Why can't I use that? Use active self. Okay. So that does is it just changes it. If it's active, it'll turn it off. Otherwise, it'll turn back on. What I don't know is if a non-active script is going to be able to receive an event. But let's try it out. So we've got the toggle thing. It's public, which means that other things in the world can access it. So we're going to go back to Unity. Unity always takes a second to load. We're going to go back to our test button up here. You know what? Yeah. And in this button's on click. We're going to actually don't want that anymore. Instead, we're going to say side pack picker view. Pack picker controller toggle. So we've now linked that method that we just created to the on-click action of this button up here. All right, so let's see if we can just fuck it on and off using that button now. All right, so turn it off, turn on, turn off, turn on. Sweet. That's good. Okay, so we can now hide and show this panel. And you can see over here in the left, if you watch that as I click the button, you can see it's disabling the thing. Now the reason that the scroll bar vertical isn't coming on is because the panel that is the content is the same size as the side pack. It's only going to show up if that panel gets bigger, which you can sort of see over here, although that's going to take some work to get that actually right. All right, anyway, so that's working now. Our next, so first of all, I'm going to commit. So I'm using something called Tower to do that, but if any of those, if those of you are not used to GitHub, we can actually do this. So I'm on a Mac, which means I'm using something called iTerm. You can use Terminal, you can use PowerShell if you're on PC. So I'm going to my Documents, Code, Repos folder. I've got all of my stuff, most of it's work stuff. I'm going to go into Side Editor, get Status. You can see I've got these are the changes I made so far. So I'm going to just add everything to the commit. Hit commit -m for message. Added in basic pack picker stub. Stub is just a word that I used that means that I made the thing, but there's nothing inside of it yet. It's just ready for me to add stuff to. So done that commit, git push origin, send it up to GitHub, and then there you go. But I use this Tower application because it's a simple GUI. It costs like $40 or something like that. Does a lot of cool stuff, but it basically is just a wrapper for these terminal commands. Okay, so we've got that. The next thing I want to do is figure out how to put a grid inside of it. So I've got the picker view, viewport, content. Oh, look at that. It already has a content view. That means I do not need this panel that I created earlier, which is great. That sounds good. Okay, I think there's something called a grid layout group. That's one of the default components in Unity. So as you can see there, I've got cell size 100 by 100. What is our current viewport width? It's going to depend on this. Position X. So that's actually not too bad because the scroll bar width is 16. So let's just say 15 instead. Bottom 0. That means it'll go all the way to the bottom there. So we got 15 there, which means that our total picker view I'm going to set to width is 515, which means you'll have 5 items across and then as many as you want high. If we wanted to actually look at a certain height, now 700, if we say 700, that means it'll fit exactly 7 objects high. I generally like to do something like this, 720, and the reason for that is if there are other items down here, you can see the tops of them, which means you won't just assume that that's all there is. So 720 means you'll be able to see 7 items plus the top of the 8th row of items as well. Okay, so we've now set the size of our picker view. We're going to actually probably start wanting to think about some of the layout as well. So we're going to take this list view. Position X is 60. Position Y, let's just say position Y is 100 to make things a little more even. And then we're going to take out that modal window that we created earlier as well. I'm going to say the picker view also 100. Actually, I'm not sure why that is. Oh, So one thing to keep an eye out with Unity is check what things are the parents. So we got side picker list view here. I actually still don't understand why this is happening. Yeah, I got nothing. Oh, it's because we're talking about the center. So one of the things that always really messes me up with Unity is the fact that you can kind of change where the relevant point is. So for games, you want the actual you want the what's called the pivot point where the coordinates are to be in the center, because you have you have like a little guy or whatever, so it's sort of center of mass. In UI design, most of the time it's the upper left corner, which is why it's confusing me. So what we're going to actually do is we're going to modify this to make it a little easier for ourselves. We're going to set both of these to the upper left, which means they stay in the same spot, but let's just say 170 by minus 530, 20, 10. So that's up from here. It's more or less the center, because that's how Unity works. It's distance from the center where the pivot point is. Well, actually, hold on. Yeah, we can't change that. So in Unity, whenever you're putting a UI thing, all UI goes onto a canvas of some sort. The center of the canvas is where you take your measurements from. So it's this side pack list view is 510 up from the center, and I honestly don't know why that's the position here. 170. Anyway. Mysterious. Okay. So this one we're going to also say upper left. I'm going to say minus 510. Right now, here we go. So that's the anchor. This is the pivot point. There you go. There you go. There you go. This one of these days. There we go. That's what I'm talking about. Okay, so whenever you're working with a new system, one of the main things you have to figure out is how the coordinate system works. So in web and iOS, 0, 0, let's look at the canvas again. 0, 0 is the upper left-hand corner of the the rectangle that you're looking at. However, because we're in Unity, 0, 0 is actually down here. I don't even know if that's true. What I do know is 0, so this is basically, you can set this between 0 and 1. So if I set it to 1, then the pivot point is going to be on the right side. If I set it to 0, it's going to be on the left side. If I set the Y pivot point to 0, it's going to be down here. If I set the Y to 1, it's going to be up here. So because I want it to be on the upper left, I've got that. And then now when I set 0, 0, it actually puts it on the upper left-hand corner of the canvas. So a little bit of a confusing coordinate system. If anybody has insight into that, let me know. But I think it's fine. So I'm going to say, put it in 15, 20, let's go 200. All right, I don't even know what's happening anymore. Minus 200. It's going down. And then we'll set our picker view to also minus 200, which will put it flush with the top. And then that looks good for now. Okay, so next thing to do is we want to get that grid working. So we got the content with the 100 by 100. Start corners upper left. Start axis is vertical. Child alignment upper left. Constraint flexible. I'm going to say fixed column count. What size is this? 515. So, fixed column count, 5. Now I'm pretty sure what this is going to do. No, we do want to go horizontal first. So I'm pretty sure what this is going to do is it's going to just lay up to 5 items across, and then it's going to descend down. The next thing to do is see if that's true. So, zoom in here and decide kind of what we want these individual things to look like. And I've kind of got an idea. So I'm going to do an empty object, which has a rect transform because it's the child of the grid, right? So we're going to say slide item cell, because this is functionally a grid view. And iOS, at least, you call those things cells, as in cells on a table. Okay, I've probably got a couple more minutes before I have to go for the day, so let's just see if we can get this real quick. So let's, on inside of that, add a image and a, let's go with modern UI. Let's put some text. That's not very good. So for some reason, the basic text in Unity really sucks, and so instead, you kind of want to do something like Text Mesh Pro. There we go. Let's call it, let's just say orange. Say 12. So the purpose of this is for the label at the bottom. So this is going to slightly overlay the thing. We want it to be centered vertically and horizontally. We want it to be bold. Ideally, I'd like it to have a shadow or something similar. But I don't know if that's an option. that'll be good for now. We might end up putting something under there if it doesn't really work out. But let's get a little test item in here. Sure. I'm just gonna steal. I'm gonna steal this. No. I'm gonna steal this. Okay. Alright. So it's not gonna be quite that easy for me. Okay. How about this? So I actually don't really need the transparency if I'm being honest right now, so I'm just going to pretend that this is what we want. Screenshot that. Go back into Unity. I'm going to put in a folder, images. Again, just kind of like we did before, I had a debug folder in there for stuff I'm going to delete later, so I'm going to do the same thing now. Debug. I'm going to say, drag this one in here. Rename it. Test asset. Test house image. And here, we're going to take this image. We're going to say source image test house. Okay, so you can see the issue there with the text. How does this work? Copy component from here. So but basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to just take this background from the actual thing and I'm going to put it on this text here. So not 100% sure how to do that. There you go. Paste component is new. Did that work? Alright, it didn't work. Alright. Oh, that's why. It can only contain one graphic component. Well, not really used this before. I'm not 100% sure we can add a background. Maybe not, but maybe that's fine. We'll deal with that later. Huh? Let's actually deal with it now. Let's try to add a UI image. In this case, it's only be that high. Put it in here. We're going to actually label this. So we're going to say Image view, text background, item name, text. Now, the reason you do stuff like this item named text rather than just item name is because once you really get into it, you end up with something that is the actual name object, which is a string, and then you have the thing that shows it. So you put item name text, or more likely you actually just call it item name label to distinguish between the thing that holds the text and the thing that is the text. So rather than like, sometimes on the road I might put like a gradient or something in here. But for now, we are just going to say alpha is, let's say 100. 150? Oh, that's about right. All right. So now, and then actually I kind of want that to be black instead. All right, so that's the what we're gonna do to show a bunch of our items here. So what we now have is we have a sprite image, text background, item name label. I think what we're gonna want to do is create a script for this to interface with an item, but that's probably something we're gonna do next time. So for now, we're just actually gonna save this as a prefab. So prefab just means it's something you've taken out of your standard Unity and you saved it so you can reuse it later. So here's how we're going to do it. We've got the side item cell here. I've got this folder down here called UI prefabs, which I made earlier. And I'm literally just going to drag it off of the thing, pop it in. Suddenly turns blue. Now watch this. So blue, that means it's a prefab. I can actually drag more in if I want to. Oops, that was the wrong button. So there we go. Oh, oops. Again, make sure you don't put something in as the parent of the wrong thing here. Now, you can see we're starting to put things in, and then if I actually, so I'm just going to copy this and paste a few more times. You can see as you add more things in, it just automatically scrolls down because of the way we set up the grid renderer inside of this content view. We said start in the upper left, fixed number of columns, 5 in this case, start axis horizontal, which means it goes to the right before it goes down, and then when you run it, you can see, here's the thing. Oh, look at that. So one of the things that's a problem here is right now you can scroll any direction in that thing. So let's go to so we were side pack figure view is our scroll view. Movement type elastic is, I think we actually want it to be clamped, which I think means, let's try this out. It means you can't move it past the bounds, I believe. Let's actually find that out before I talk out of my ass too much. Okay, we now have more items than will fit in there comfortably. Okay, clamps just means you can't use it at all. It might mean it's programmatic or something like that. So let's say unrestricted. What does that do? Just means you can do whatever you want to, which you would actually use for something like an image view or a map view. So that's not what we want either. I think we do actually want elastic. Elasticity, I'm going to put this down because that felt like too much for me. So I'm going to do 0.01. We're going to turn off the horizontal scrolling. Let's see how that looks. So you can see it's not quite as jumpy as it was before. What I don't like. Interesting. Okay, let's see if that fixes our problem for us. Yeah, it sure does. So what I just did is, so I don't know if you saw the problem before, but the problem before is that it was sticking to the size of the panel, which was originally the size of the scroll view when I added it. So I added a content size fitter component, which means it takes whatever is inside of it, in this case all these identical houses, and it makes sure that that panel is the same size as all of those houses, which means that now when I run this thing, it's always going to be as many items as I put in there, that's how big the content is going to be. So there's that. I kind of want it to be slightly more elastic than that. It's not quite enough. So I'm going to say 0.5. There we go. That feels pretty good now. Let's still hide it and show it that way. So we have our basic interface set up here. Now, next time, the goal is, and I might work on this sometimes when I'm not streaming too, so whenever I do that, I'll try to go over what was missed. But basically, my next task is going to be to link these to specific data objects, and then pull them, set it up so that if you click on, say, spaceship, it pops out all of the items that are a spaceship. And you can click any of those to select it, you can click on it, and then you can paint it around in the scene. So my next step is just to link this to data and add a plus button down here for creating new assets within a specific folder. And then we'll start to get into a little bit more of the actual data management and stuff like that. So for now, though, I'm just going to get rid of most of these. Generally speaking, in my opinion, the point of a prefab is it's like a template. So you don't want to have like a whole bunch of different things. So I've got the one side item cell, which is my master cell. If I update this, it'll update the prefab, I believe automatically. Let me see if that's actually true. So now let's see. I'm gonna save it. That's the wrong button. It did not. So now did it? Yeah. So I just dragged it. So once I updated the prefab item here, I dragged it back down on the prefab here, which updated the prefab. Okay. I don't really know what any of this stuff means. That's for another time. So anyway, I've got my single prefab here, which is sort of my master prefab. I can update it from there if I want to. And then what's going to happen is once I get into code next time, I'm going to have it delete that default child out of there. And then I'm going to have it generate an item of that as a child for every side item in the selected side pack over here. So my immediate task is to make it so this opens when you select a side pack here. This knows what that side pack is. This gets a list of items inside that side pack, shows a button for each of them, and then shows a plus button which allows you to add it. That's my goal for next time. And then I also kind of want to set it up so if you tap outside of this box, it'll automatically close it. So those are my tasks for next time. Thanks for watching.